Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Let me make sure the sound is working, and it is. We are good. All right. Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Musab Sadia. I'm the outreach manager at Majlis Shura, Islamic Leadership Council of New York. And we are here with our newest program that we are so excited to present to you all, Muslim Community Corner. Muslim Community Corner is actually an idea that we came up with on the fly. This idea of there's a very big Muslim community in New York City that's just unengaged by its elected officials. It's unengaged by its government officials. And there's a very big sentiment in the Muslim community where they feel like government and public servants are so far out of reach where they don't have the ability to actually meet with them. And they feel like their voices aren't heard. So we made this forum so the Muslim community can meet with an elected official or a government official or other community leaders in New York City and New York State, and to speak with them and to speak their problems directly to them through me, of course, the host, and other hosts that will be joining us in future programs. This is going to be a monthly program. We're really excited to show you guys, our amazing guests. But let's start with our guest for the day, Brother Zohran. Brother Zohran, how are you doing?
Doing well. Assalamu alaikum, Musab. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So thank you for joining us. Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, he's, a friend of mine. I've known him for a few years now, but we figured for this program, there's no better person to start it off with than Brother Zohran. He is our very own Assemblyman in District 36, right? Yep. District 36, which covers Astoria and a few other neighborhoods around there. Brother Zohran got his political start in the Father K and the Khidr Yatim campaign, where I actually met him as I believe you were the field director there, right?
Yeah, I was running the paid canvas. So anything canvas was me.
Yeah, and then he kind of just went up the ladder from there. He made a political career for himself, and he put himself as a model for a lot of Muslims who are interested in politics, but also progressives and people who stick by their principles and their ethics. But you guys didn't come here to listen to me. You came to listen to Zohran, and so did I. So I'm going to pass it on to him with our first question. Zohran, tell me a little more about yourself and your political story, and what kind of got you into politics, and especially electoral politics.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Zohran Mamdani. I was born and raised in Kampala, Uganda. I moved to New York City when I was 7 years old. And my political journey is in many ways centered around the issue of Palestinian solidarity activism. So, growing up in a family that was very political, the issue of Palestine was one that was very near and dear to me. And, I'm Ugandan. My father came of age in the independence era, fighting against the forces of colonialism, both in terms of that which was there prior to independence and that which was there post-independence. And Palestine was always a struggle that anyone who cared about independence in that time and who cared about colonialism and who then cared about apartheid in South Africa also cared about Palestine, especially where I grew up. And when I went to college at Bowdoin College, a small liberal arts school in Maine, I co-founded our school's first Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP. And for me, that was a real moment where my politics transformed from something that was passive, something that I held and maybe discussed and debated on Facebook, into something that was active, where I organized with others to create events and to agitate my fellow students and to push campaigns around the campus. And, we had maybe 8, 10, sometimes 11 active members, but because we were all so invested, we started to host the first Palestinian film festival that we had at our school. We launched an academic boycott campaign to get our school in compliance with the demands of BDS vis-a-vis universities that we were partnering with or having study abroad with in Israel and in the occupied territories of Palestine. This was the journey for me into politics. And so when you take that journey, as you may know, and you probably know, and whoever is listening and watching probably knows, you don't get into Palestinian solidarity activism if you have any interest in getting into elected politics in this country. It's almost like two complete opposite dreams. And so I did not have any hopes to become an elected official, because I had already seen my father had job opportunities pulled from him because of his stance on Palestine, because of his critiques of American foreign policy, specifically there. And I had seen so many other activists in SJP, specifically in California, face all kinds of repression for their activism on campus. You know, the website Canary Mission, which would try and document pro-Palestinian activists at every college campus across the country. But then, as you said, I worked on Father Khadr al-Yatim's campaign, who was a Palestinian, continues to be, a Palestinian Lutheran minister, who also was a socialist. And those were two main issues for me. It was Palestine and was socialism. And because of the universality of socialism as a political ideology, one that did not have exceptions for Palestine, I was really drawn to it. And as well as, its critiques of the economic system and its beliefs in what a dignified life would look like for people. And so Father K, what he did is he showed me that my politics internationally and locally could exist in the context of local politics. You could be pro-BDS and anti-developer and run for city council. And it was a very close race. We only lost by 8 points, came in second. And for many of us, it was our first time in politics in terms of door knocking, canvassing, mailers, all these things. I truly believe had we known then what we know now, we would have won that race. But that was the birth for many of us. And that race changed my life. I went on to become the campaign manager for Ross Barkin. I then was one of the DSA's point people for Tiffany Caban's race for district attorney. And then I ran for office myself. And my dream is that we can finally have a time where young Muslim New Yorkers, or Muslim New Yorkers of every age, do not feel like they have to silence themselves or their beliefs because of the history of being persecuted and prosecuted for Palestinian activism.
Yeah, that's really powerful, because one of the most vivid memories that I have of you is at one of these Palestine protests, Mans walks in as an elected official. He's a state elected, and he just grabs the mic and just starts yelling BDS. And I'm like, man, does this guy have a re-election to worry about? But that's how it. That's what's important. What's important is you stand by your principle and you stand by what you believe to be true, and you stand by justice, right? And I guess the next thing is we're seeing a rise in this across New York City. I mean, especially in Queens, right? Queens used to be, even on a local level, when you talk about state electeds, it used to be, a lot of old Democrats, a lot of, policy-wise, you're talking about pro-developer, you're talking about anti-BDS, elected officials, and now it's pretty much changed in just about a cycle in the representation that it has. So what do you think this spells out for the future of New York City politics for Muslims and other marginalized groups, and hopefully for the state?
Yeah, I think that, what it spells out is that we are a sleeping giant in New York City politics, right? I want to first say that the reason I have my political beliefs and that I state them so clearly is because of what someone who I consider to be like a mentor, an elder sister, Alia Latif, once told me: make sure that when you come home at night, that you are still proud of what you see in the mirror. And there are too many times in this world of politics where people push you to make compromises that make you question what you're even doing in this world in the first place. And I would rather be true to who I am and to who I was raised to be and to who I have and to the people I have organized with than make those kinds of compromises. But the thing I will add is that to be in favor of Palestinian rights is not the death sentence of political futures that it used to be. And the reason for that is organizing, and the reason for that is not only the growing Muslim vote, but the growing movement of groups such as DSA, who are not explicitly a Muslim group in any way. It's a group that is a socialist group, has many Muslim members such as myself, but it's pro-BDS. We've never used to have any major political organizations in New York City or in this country who staked out a position on BDS like this. But what I would add is that, a lot of elected officials will tell you, I can't take this vote because of who my constituents are. I might agree with you, but I just can't do this. My district will not allow it. My predecessor in this office was consistently and vocally in favor of Zionist rhetoric and policies and politics. We have the same exact district. So the point I'm making here is there are a lot of elected officials who are overlooking the Muslim community in their district. And they're allowed to do that because we don't show any consequence for that. And the beautiful thing is now that is changing. And I'm really excited about that because what I saw in this last mayoral race, as messy as it was and as many things as it left to be desired, was a growing Muslim engagement with municipal politics, specifically around Palestine. Andrew Yang being confronted by my constituents in Astoria without any organization. They just confronted him on their own. Him being uninvited from a food distribution event because of his comments on Palestine. Eric Adams being uninvited from an event in Coney Island, unendorsed by a Muslim PAC because of his comments on Palestine. Obviously, there's a lot left to do, but I think there's a growing willingness within the Muslim community to take what has typically been unorganized anger in the world of New York City politics and bring it to the ballot box. And I think that's what we have to do because we have to show politicians that Palestine is not just a cost. There's also a benefit if you speak up. Because for too many people, they view the only benefit as a moral one, but we have to make it into a political benefit as well.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful because it's interesting when you think about, for example, I think it was in 2014 or 2016, when now former Governor Cuomo, I cannot believe I'm saying those words, but former Governor Cuomo, signed he signed an executive order basically saying that New York State is an anti-BDS state and saying that companies that do engage in BDS are going to be blacklisted by New York State government. We will not conduct business with anybody who boycotts, who boycotts or divests or sanctions, Israel. And that was, it was kind of insane. I mean, really, because when you think about it as a New York State governor, what business do you have being proactive on an issue like BDS? And now we're looking at a growing insurgency, I would say, inside the state legislature that is very much pro BDS, that is very much anti, that sentiment. And even if it isn't pro BDS themselves, the safe position now has become, I'm not pro BDS, but I will never fight against the right for people to boycott. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask you, what's your personal plan as a legislator to kind of reverse the record on New York State and BDS?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things. One is we have to override and overrule that executive order. It is a disgusting executive order. The other is that I want to make clear that we've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go. And people are being killed in Palestine today. And the stakes are extremely high. And so we cannot allow ourselves to become too, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm also speaking mostly to myself in many ways, to become too self-congratulatory about, okay, we were in such a bad place, the bar was so low, now we've gone over it, and now we're fine. Because it's unacceptable, I think, for us to let candidates answer the question only of whether they will criminalize BDS or not. That's just, do you believe in the First Amendment or not? That's really what that question is. And it speaks to anti-Palestinian bigotry that you can still get away with saying you don't believe in the First Amendment for Palestinians and it's up for debate. I think what we have to do is to take what is considered a foreign policy issue and bring that energy into the legislature with the bills that pertain to that. And we have to make it clear, we were not the ones that asked the New York State legislature to weigh into the issue of Israel-Palestine. The legislature has been doing this, backing Zionist rhetoric and legislation. This was not a thing that we began. We are responding to a history here. We're responding to that executive order. We're responding to resolutions. We're responding to anti-BDS bills that are still being introduced to this day in various committees, whether it be education or whatever have you. So I think that we have to do that transformation. And one way that we do that is to ensure that we elect candidates who are openly pro-BDS. I think that we may have only had one pro-BDS legislator openly prior to the 2020 cycle. Now, we had 2 or 3. Now we're, I think, close to 10. And we have to keep it growing. And that means that when we see politicians, we ask them and we demand of them that they say yes. And if they don't say yes, then we don't give them our votes. Because I think for too long in our community, and I say this with full respect, there has been a feeling like it's just such a beautiful thing to even be acknowledged by politicians. We're so grateful that they even come to our events and see us as human beings because of how much anti-Muslim racism there has been in this country. And now we have to transition from gratefulness to demands, and an understanding that we do not need to tiptoe around the fact that we belong here and that our views must be respected. And if they are not respected, then we will not show up at the ballot box for those candidates. So I think that is a big testament to what we have coming up in the next election cycle. And also when these local electeds go on paid-for trips to Israel, to make them know that we know what they've done and we will remember what they've done.
Absolutely. So just to kind of shift gears here, we spoke with some folks in your district, actually, some folks from many of the messages. We have, I think, like 6 messages in your district that are members of our organization. And we spoke about, what are the issues that are most important to them. And there was just a resounding, like, I would say deafening silence, not silence, but very deafening realization of gentrification in Astoria and rising housing prices. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. How does that look like in Astoria? Because I'm personally from Staten Island. I'm up in Astoria like every weekend. Now, not so much, but usually I'm up there in the weekend. And I do see it, but I wanted to ask you about that. How does that look like in Astoria, and what's your plan to build a city in New York City that is anti-gentrification, or that, kind of takes care of the indigenous population while also being open to people who come here to make their living and, to chase a new future in our great city?
Absolutely. And I think that, it is no surprise to me that this is the number one issue of the masajid in Astoria, because this was the central focus issue of my campaign when I ran for office. And the reason it was is because this is the issue on everyone's mind. Whether having a place to call home, having shelter, that is the critical component of each Astorian's life. And what we have seen here in Astoria is the rent has just skyrocketed over the last, whether you want to look at it in a couple of years or decade or many decades. You can even look, there's an article in the New York Times from the year 2000 about Bangladeshi immigrants living in Astoria being priced out then because of the rising housing prices and being forced to Detroit. People think often of gentrification as like a post-2000, right? Like maybe like 2006, I don't know, whenever people like think about it, but it's often discussed in a more recent phenomenon. So if you're thinking that 21 years ago it was still unaffordable for people, it speaks to the fact that we have not taken commensurate action to stop this being an issue. There are a couple of things. One is that we have a program called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This is a program that we fought for in the legislature. More than $2 billion have been allocated to this program to ensure that New Yorkers, regardless of immigration status, can receive rental assistance so that they can get out of debt and stay in their homes. New York was one of the last states to distribute a single dollar of this program. And that speaks to Governor Cuomo's incompetence and his malice towards any issues that are there to benefit the working class of New York State. Now we have a new governor who has said in the last few days that this will be a focus of hers, getting the money out. So one of the things that the reason I'm bringing this up, one of the ways in which you stop a neighborhood from being gentrified is to ensure that the people who live there now can continue to live there. And one of the ways you do that is to ensure that they get money in their pocket to stay in their apartments that they have been behind on in rent. And so last week on Thursday, I protested about this program and about the forthcoming eviction moratorium expiration, and I got arrested for that. I spent time in a cell. And it's because this is life or death for many people across this neighborhood and across the state. The other thing is legislatively, Musab, what we need to do is pass a bill called good cause eviction. What this bill would do is it would create tenant protections for market rate tenants. A lot of the people you're speaking to at the masajid across Astoria are people who live in apartments that are not rent controlled. They're not rent stabilized. And that makes sense because 50% of Queens tenants live in market rate apartments. And a market rate apartment means the landlord can set any price as your rent. There's no controls on that rent. And so you might have been in an apartment for 20 years paying $600. And then all of a sudden, the 21st year, the landlord's like, yo, by the way, it's going up to $2,000 next year. That's an eviction. That is an eviction to get that kind of a notice. What good cause eviction does is it mandates that a landlord can only increase the rent on market rate apartments by an amount tied to inflation, which is, let's say, around 3.3%, an amount that is manageable, right? And there are exceptions to this because people will say, what about small landlords, things like that. This only applies, there's an exemption if you are a small landlord who lives in the property of 3 or less units. Then it's exempted from this. But really the issue of gentrification is not driven by small landlords. It's driven by large-scale property owners. And so that's what this bill does. It puts a cap on what they can do. Because when I was running, I would be at the subway stop, I would be canvassing people door to door. They would be telling me about rent increases that were just unbelievable. And yet completely believable because this is what the word has been in Astoria. So I've been pushing that bill. It's a bill that a colleague of mine, Pam Hunter, holds. I've been advocating and organizing on the inside around that bill. I have still a lot more to do this next session. And then I've also been organizing around this program to ensure that we can get the money into people's pockets. But we cannot allow, too often what happens is immigrant populations or, just generally people of color in New York City and state make a neighborhood desirable through the hard work and effort that they put into their lives here. And then once it reaches a point of desirability, they become priced out of it. And at the same time, as you said, we do not want to demonize people who move to the neighborhood because too often what large-scale capital or real estate wants to do is make you think that it's an individual problem. But this is a structural problem that can be solved by structural solutions. So that's what we're pushing for.
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of frame it in that way because a lot of people, when they hear my dad, for example, he is a small landlord, right? We have like a house in Staten Island that we have 2 units. We rent them out. And if you told him something like this, he'd be like, man, this is crazy. What do you mean I can't, So it's important to kind of when you structure it like, okay, there is, it is systemic. It is structural. It's something that we need to address as a system. That way, the people who are, your day-to-day New Yorkers who are also just trying to get by aren't the ones who are being affected by this regulation. And the regulation is being put on the people who actually need it. People, or I should say the entities, the corporations that actually need those regulations so that they don't end up destroying the city. And that brings me to the last thing, actually, that sign on your wall. So about, the Astoria plant, about climate change, obviously the most pressing issue. Yep, right there. The most pressing issue of our generation, climate change. What is your vision for New York State being a leading state in the fight against climate change?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask about that, Musab, because today was actually the final hearing on the Astoria. I can't even tell which side it is on the Astoria power plant. And it's something that I've opposed for now over a year when I was running for office. It's something that many people in Astoria opposed. And one of the things that I was so excited about was that I carry a bill in the Assembly called the Clean Futures Act, which would ban the construction of power plants across New York State if a renewable plant could meet that need. And science shows us that renewable plants can meet the need at every level. And so in the course of advocating and organizing around that plant, we held an iftar, which was really, really exciting to me because too often the Muslim community has not been given the time of day when it comes to environmental organizing, environmental justice. And one of the things that I want to make clear is that my belief in socialist values is a belief grounded in the ethos of solidarity. And my first interaction with solidarity came out of Ramadan. And to be socialist is not too difficult after being Muslim, from and understanding what it is that Ramadan means. And so to have an iftar around this issue, to bring together leaders in the Muslim community, uncles, aunties, kids all across our neighborhood, and have a conversation, it was, for me, what I really hope to do in office and what I really hope to do with these pieces of legislation, which is to bring our community from the margins of the discussion into the center of it, and to ensure that so many people who have been doing the work are finally recognized for that work. And I think that in New York State, what we need to do is not just stop this one power plant, but to stop any fossil fuel power plant, and to ensure that we actually live up to this ideal that we hold of our state as a progressive beacon in America. Because under Governor Cuomo, we were not that. We just got to use it for branding. But when it came to what we were doing with renewable energy, he was still allowing us to contemplate spending billions of dollars on additional fossil fuel infrastructure. And if you've read the IPCC report, or you've seen reports about it, you know that we're at a critical point in this. And it's easy when you read something like that to feel discouraged, to feel a sense of despair, a sense of doom. But I really do want to say to everyone that there is still a lot of our future that we can win. There are still a lot of the worst effects of climate change that we can avert. And the way that we do that is to actually get involved in organizing. And for me, it's been such an exciting and joyful time, because I think that we're actually going to defeat this plant. And then next year, inshallah, we'll pass the legislation to defeat all of the plants.
Inshallah. So I guess we're looking towards the end of the session. So I want to enter a bit of a quick fire round before final remarks. Favorite train station, go.
Favorite train. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but my favorite train station is Herald Square.
Oh my God.
I gotta be honest why. I hate the train station, but there is this interactive sculpture. I don't know if you've ever been on this. I think it's on the uptown NQRW side, where if you stand in front of it, it starts to play music and you can interact with somebody on the downtown side.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I've got to check it out then.
It took me 20 years in New York City to realize that existed.
Wow. I mean, I've been here for 20 years. I've never seen that. So I've got to check it out now. Okay, Herald Square. That's on my list. Best food place in Astoria. This is definitely, or actually on Steinway.
This is going to get you. I want to get reelected. Why would you? Okay, best food place. I got to go with Abu Kir.
Which one?
Abu Kir.
Oh, okay.
Egyptian joint.
Say it again?
It's a seafood place. It's an Egyptian.
Oh,
Egyptian joint.
I know what you're talking about. It's like right next to Duzan, right?
Yeah, it's right next to Duzan.
Yes, Duzan's my favorite, but Abu Khair is pretty good too. That's
and then if you want smoothies, you got to go to Himo's.
Oh, always. Himo's is will always hit the spot.
Number 45 refresher.
Say it again.
The number 45 refresher. That's the one.
Man for the people. He knows his order. Let's see. Walking or biking? Biking. Okay. Interesting. And I guess, final remarks right now. For any, Muslim New Yorker, young, old, whether they're trying to get into politics or not, what is your message to the Muslim community that you want to leave them off with today?
My message would be that do not listen to anyone that tells you have to sacrifice a part of yourself to be a part of this political system in the city and in this country. You should embrace who you are, the values that you hold, the political beliefs that make you, and you should find an organization that shares those beliefs and then organize. Because it can often be really lonely and alienating and isolating to be a Muslim who's political in this country. And one way to fight that isolation is to join with others who share those beliefs. And you'll find that when you join with others who share those beliefs, you can actually bring them to life. For me, that organization has been DSA, but it can be any organization. And I think that it's just important to find one that has a real rank and file mass movement and is actually doing the work. And you'll find that you will not only feel a lot better, but you'll start to see a world that you were told was impossible. You'll start to actually build it yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, Zohran, for being with us today. I mean, again, great friend to the Muslim community and to Majlis Shura. Zohran always doing amazing work for the community, and we're happy to honestly kick off this great series that's meant to empower the Muslim community with such an empowering figure for the Muslim community here in New York. So before we go, I wanted to announce, well, not necessarily announce. Actually, sorry, Zohran, we have one last question for you in the chat. What would you do to provide halal food in all New York State schools?
Yeah, so this is, I mean, the beautiful thing is that this is a fight that has already been begun at New York City level. There's a pilot program that was launched. I think that we have to take the successes of that pilot program and take it to the state level in terms of legislation. The sad reality is right now there aren't enough votes for that kind of legislation. It's something that I fully agree with. I don't think that any child should have to choose between their faith and hunger. And one thing that I really believe in is that the role of government has to be ever present in providing dignity to people across the state. And yet there are many people, both in my party and in the Republican Party, who do not want to expand the role of government. They do not want to add any additional programs. They have this fear about what that may mean. And then there's also anti-Muslim racism about why would we do something like this? What does halal even mean? So I think that the way that we have to do it is to build a statewide coalition that is calling for it. Because right now, in terms of the numbers of legislators who are ready to go as of now, there's simply not enough at all. But when you put pressure on politicians, they move. So that is the thing that I would say, is to organize within the Muslim community and make this the statewide ask for next year.
Yeah, and I will say the pilot program that you're actually talking about, we're the certifiers for. We've been on day one, we've been fighting for this for that pilot program here in New York City. And look, we're happy to have conversations about how we can expand it to New York State, to all New York State schools. And we'd love to sit down with your office and talk about it and see how we can make this a reality soon, inshallah. So thank you so much for coming on. Before we head out, I just, and this is also an invitation to you, Zohran, but let me put this up here really quickly. So, all right. Okay, so I wanted to invite you all. Why is this thing like this? Okay, whatever. So this is our gala. That's the gala, flyer right there. And we're going to be having our great speakers. Zohran, you're more than welcome to come by, say your remarks. It's going to be on September 25th. You can find all the information on our social media. And thank you all so much for coming. Also, don't forget, tomorrow is the final deadline to nominate a Muslim for our Muslim New Yorker of the Year awards. We have them in 3 categories: Muslim New Yorker of the Year, Muslima New Yorker of the Year, which is for the sisters, and Muslim Youth of the Year, or Muslim New Yorker Youth of the Year. So we have 3 categories. Nomination deadline ends tomorrow night. And get your nominations in, and we'll see you all very soon, inshallah. And we have our next Muslim Community Corner is going to be in September. I believe the date is, we have the speaker confirmed and everything. I believe the date is September 23rd. But we'll see you all then, inshallah. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Musab.